Chapter 8. Ella. After they cleared the city gates, Thomas allowed the horses to slow a little. He opened the window that separated him from the inside of the carriage. "What happened, Miss Ella?" She dug around in the storage under her seat and found a blanket, wrapping it around herself. Having failed to retrieve her cloak, the warmth was welcome. "I met someone, but I ran out of time." Looking down, she said stiffly, "He didn't want me anyway." "Are you sure about that? The young man chasing you looked rather desperate." A teasing note entered his voice. "I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he showed up at your door tomorrow afternoon." "For that, he'd have to know where I live," she sighed. "Even if I had mentioned where we're from, he would come looking for a finely dressed merchant's daughter, not a servant." "But if you saw him, or if he sees you?" Thomas protested. "We could pass each other on the street and we wouldn't know each other." "And why wouldn't you?" "It was a mask," Ella replied with a shrug. "Neither of us saw the other's face. Not completely." Thomas didn't respond. She fingered the mask in her hands. "Speaking of masks, Thomas, do you have any idea what happened to mine?"
"Your mask?"
She heard an unusual quiver in his voice.
"Oh, yes, the mask. Since it was short notice, I had to use an unusual dye. It must have damaged the fabric."
He gave an unconvincing chuckle as he smoothed the hair over his ears. She thought she saw a tapered tip between the strands, but it must have been a trick of the moonlight. Ears weren't shaped like that. "I think you should refuse to buy more," Ella commented, holding it up in the small amount of moonlight. "It destroyed the fabric after only a few hours."
"Yes, I'll have to decline that particular substance in the future."
Ella frowned as she shifted in her seat. "I hope I didn't ruin this dress. I took a tumble down the steps. Between that and the running, I may have done something to the seams." She could see Thomas's head angled toward her.
"Oh? Oh, why do you say that?"
"When we left, it fit perfectly," she frowned. "But now," she plucked at it, "it seems a bit loose in places." The silence stretched out. Ella snuggled into the blanket. She appreciated the crisp sound of the horses' hooves and the gentle whispers of the wind through the open window, but it made her cold.
"I'll look over it when we get back to my house,"
he finally said, that strange quiver in his voice again.
"Don't trouble yourself over it, Miss Ella. I'm sure that it's fine."
"Not if you get in trouble with your buyer, and all for nothing."
"All for nothing?" He cut her off with a snort. "Why do you think that?"
"Why wouldn't I?" she replied, confused. "I went to the ball looking for a young man who would take me away from my stepmother's home. I am returning alone and with no hope of change. I thought there was something between Mike and me, but I was wrong." She stared morosely out the side window. "Even if he felt compelled to search for me, he wouldn't know where to look, and he wouldn't be looking for a servant. How is that not for nothing?"
"Did you not have a beautiful evening?" Thomas riposted. "Did you not taste the freedom that should be yours? Then how can you claim it was for nothing?"
"I suppose you're right," she reluctantly admitted. "But knowing what I'm going back to, I almost wish I'd never left. I can't miss what I've never had."
"A little beauty to look back on isn't a bad thing, Miss Ella. Just make sure you let it lift you up, not drag you down. Don't give up. Keep fighting. Don't let your stepmother win. Remember that you are made for more than the life she tries to hold you to."
Ella was shocked by the amount of fire in his voice. She knew that Thomas gave fuller vent to his emotions than she did hers, but he was surprisingly vehement on this topic. "I suppose I can try," she finally said, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. They drove in silence for a while. Ella was about to reach up and close the window when he spoke again.
"Don't give up hope, Miss Ella," he said quietly. "You never know what tomorrow will bring."
She knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. Tomorrow would be free while her stepmother traveled home, but after that, each tomorrow would be the same as her yesterday's. Ella might wish for change, but the sad reality was that, for her, there could be no escape. Not for another 4 years. Ella slid the window closed, snuggled down in her borrowed blanket, and let herself drift off into sleep. Thomas drove her to his home so she could change. Her offers to help with the dress were firmly refused. He seemed anxious that she not examine it. She would have walked back to Lombardy Manor immediately, but his wife had prepared a guest suite for her, and Thomas insisted she rest there first. Mid-morning found Ella back in her childhood home, stubbornly cleaning the front windows. A good night's sleep had restored the determination that had sent her to the ball. No, Mike wouldn't be coming for her, but in a few years she would be free to find another position. She couldn't choose to not work, but she could choose her attitude. "No time like the present to start practicing," she murmured as she wiped the glass clean, admiring the streakless surface. It was much harder to maintain her resolution that evening when her stepfamily arrived. Cynthia and Diana whined and pouted. Cynthia, because the prince had refused to accept a drink from her. Diana, because he never looked her way. Stepmother stormed about, irritated that even with all her preparation, the prince had chosen neither of her daughters. "The money I spent on that potion wasted." Without lifting her chin from her hand, Cynthia complained, "It was a waste anyway. Magic is a myth. He wouldn't fall in love with me because we drank from the same cup." "You didn't seem to think that at the ball," Diana sniped, fiddling with her bracelet. "You were convinced that he'd be yours by the end of the night." Her stepfamily drifted into silence while Ella dusted the bookshelves. "Who did he choose?" she asked cautiously. Speaking first was a risk, but she found herself surprisingly curious to know the outcome. What type of girl had Mike's friend settled on? "No one," Cynthia groaned as she flopped back in her chair. "The ball ended without him choosing anyone at all." "No," Diana added, "but he did leave the ball with the pretty young woman in a red dress." Stepmother sniffed. "Do try to conceal your ignorance, Diana. That was the Ralnoran princess." "A princess?" Cynthia wailed. "How are we supposed to compete with a princess?" "Hold your tongue," Stepmother snapped. "You are as bad as your sister." She tapped a finger on the end table. "The Ralnoran princess is already married. They left together because the Ralnoran crown prince and our prince are friends." "It makes sense," Ella added without thinking. "Ralnor and Dara are friends. Why shouldn't their leaders be as well?" Stepmother turned to face her with a flat expression. "And what would you know about the politics of our kingdom?" Ella hesitated. "Father told me." It was true, but it was also true that Mike had jogged her memory. "I want to know who the girl was who fled. She ran like the king's hounds were on her tail," Diana cut in. Cynthia giggled. "What do you suppose her partner said to her? She didn't even stop when he chased after her." "But did you see his face when he came back alone?" Diana replied, a slightly dreamy expression on her own face. "With nothing but a blue slipper in his hands." He had picked it up? Stepmother's eyes turned back to Ella, a suspicious light filling them. "Yes, she did cause quite a stir, and curiously enough, he called her Ella." Ella kept her eyes on the bookshelf that she was dusting. "Where were you last night, Arabella?" Through long practice, Ella kept her expression even. "Where do you think I was, stepmother? I no longer have a horse." She let her bitterness fill her voice. "And even if I did, I couldn't have attended the ball dressed like this. So why do you think that I was anywhere other than here?" "That had better be so." Stepmother's eyes narrowed at her. Ella almost spit out an angry response, but she held it in. It would do more harm than good. 4 more years. She only had to last 4 more years, and then she could be free. The conversation moved on after that, and Ella managed to escape to a different part of the house. It was lonely, but when the only people around were her stepmother and stepsisters, better to be alone like usual than to suffer through their company. She wished that Mike had cared about her for his own sake. She would much rather be with him right now. For the rest of the evening, she dreamed of Mike while performing her duties. How he had looked when he smiled at her, how his eyes glowed every time they met after a turn, how full her heart had been every moment that she was clasped in his arms. She kept having to blink back tears so that she could see her work, but she couldn't stop. Mike had been the best thing to happen to her in years, even if he had only been hers for the space of a few hours. She couldn't give up on her dream quite yet, even though she knew that it would never come true. If she couldn't have Mike, could she run away? Stepmother could only use the law to bring her back if she could find her. She couldn't stay near Lombardy Manor, though, and with no money and no horse, that would be a difficult prospect. She refused to steal from the little that her stepfamily had, no matter how much of it had come from the sale of her own possessions. Ella sighed. Theoretically, it was possible, but she didn't have the courage to try. Despite her harsh treatment, it was too big of a risk. So, instead of plotting her escape, Ella wiped her eyes, forced herself to hum a happy tune, and scrubbed away at the floor. At least she had the memory of silky black hair, brown eyes, and a black mask to keep her company.